Hi guys, it's Laree and welcome to my channel. If you've been looking for a DIY scrunchie tutorial that is easy, does not involve any fancy turning tools, and has no hand stitching, this is the video for you. So guys, I'm going to tell you how I have been making my scrunchies. I use two methods for making scrunchies depending on what kind of fabric I'm sewing. So I found that one way works best with woven fabrics. That's your cotton fabric, your linen fabric, your satin fabrics, and another method, a different method that you have seen pretty often on YouTube. It's been floating around there. Works best on knit fabric. So your jerseys, your velvets, your high lycra nylon fabrics. So I'm going to show you two different methods, and each method I'm going to tell you how they work best for each type of fabric. To get started on my scrunchie, I'm going to start with the strip of fabric that is 22 inches long and it is 4¼ inches wide. I have 1/4 inch elastic that I've cut to 7½ inches long. You can see that there. 7½ inches long. And I'm also going to use today for one of the methods a safety pin. And just to avoid any skip stitches on our knit and highly stretched fabrics, I have a pack of ballpoint needles on hand. You're going to start by sewing the ends of this strip of fabric together. I sewed mine at 1/2 inch seam allowance. Be sure to backstitch at the beginning and the end of the stitch. When you're done with this, you'll take it over to the ironing board and press that seam open. You'll also press the entire strip in half. After you've ironed this open, we are going to open our material. Open it. Now let's turn this over. I'm just going to move this edge and this edge of the fabric out of the way, and I'm going to bring that seam around everything. I'm just going to sandwich the middle in there, just like that. I'm going to put this pin here, and I'm not going to start sewing at the seam. I'm going to move down a little bit, and I'm going to start sewing a few inches down here. I'm sewing my edges at 3/8 inch seam allowance. To form a tube, pull the middle of this hot dog through as you sew the edges. Continue sewing and pulling and going around. Now, when we get close to the seam, slow down because we're going to do something different. Hey, if you're enjoying this so far and you're not subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. So I'm starting to get close to that seam. And basically, because I'm running out of space to stick my hands in and pull from the middle, I'm going to start pulling from the inside of the tube. So where that pressed crease is, instead of putting my fingers here on the outside, I'm going to start putting my fingers on the other side and pulling the rest of this tube through like this. So I'm coming up to the place where I started. I'm going to leave a little space here. Now I'm going to start pulling this tube through. So now I'm going to take my safety pin and elastic, and I'm going to string this through. Before you go too far, be sure to take another pin and secure the end of this elastic so it doesn't twist on you. It doesn't twist or nor does it get pulled through the tube. Okay. And just pull it all the way around. Now that I have that, I can take this off. And I'm just gonna go ahead and pull these elastic ends all the way out as much as I can to give myself some space. And I have overlapped my ends about 1/4 to 3/4 of an inch on either side. So I am gonna sew this on the sewing machine, but I am gonna just put this to the side for now, and I'm gonna show you the second method of making scrunchies. I'm gonna start this method not by sewing the ends together like this, but by sewing the sides together. So I'm gonna sew this right sides together. Just gonna start at the top. I'm gonna sew this at 3/8 of an inch because that's what I decided I wanted my seam allowance to be. Make sure I back stitch that as I get started. And then I'm gonna sew down. And I'm gonna leave a little bit of a space. So I'm gonna leave some space here and keep going. And here's what it looks like. So now I'm gonna put this one to the side because I already have one of these done, and it's gonna be easier to see the contrast between the right side and the wrong side. Now it's time to grab your safety pin. Go ahead and open that seam and put the safety pin in near the edge. You're gonna put the safety pin in the tube and begin to slide the fabric along. We're not gonna turn this tube completely inside out, but we're gonna bring the first edge all the way to the opposite edge. And we're going to stop right about here. Okay? Take this off, and now I'm gonna match up the seams. Gonna open this, make sure it's flat, it's not bulky. I'm gonna match up the seams, and I'm gonna put some pins in this. Not in the stitch line, but below the stitch line, just to keep this in place. Because we're about to do a lot of pulling and tugging, and I don't want this seam to move. Okay, and I'm gonna go to the other side of this tube and I'm gonna pin this below the stitch line so that as I'm sewing, I don't have to take these pins out. Okay, so this method of pulling one end of the tube through to the other end, it works best with knit and stretch materials, as you can see, because you have this tiny opening that needs to be stitched. If this were a woven fabric like a cotton or a satin, this right here would not be possible. So this is the trick for sewing a tiny space like this on the sewing machine. I'm gonna take my regular presser foot off. Take it off. And I'm gonna put a much smaller zipper foot on. Now, I have a couple of things working for me here. This fabric is stretchy. I can stretch it over the presser foot, and the presser foot is small, so it's gonna go inside of this space a lot easier, and it's gonna move around a lot easier than the regular presser foot. And I'm just gonna put this on and start sewing and make my way to the 1/2 inch seam allowance. Look at that. That zipper foot fits in here so nicely. Now I want to keep my eye on the seam allowance and make sure it stays open, it stays flat. Here's a sewing tip for you. If you don't already practice doing this, take your foot off of the pedal when you're not sewing for times like these, so you don't accidentally put weight on it and sew your finger, because sewing your finger is a real thing. Okay. And I'm gonna stretch this and stitch, overlap a little bit, back stitch a little bit, and there it is. And now I can take these out. Okay, so that little part is where I lifted the presser foot and needed to adjust some, but there it is. From here, I'm gonna find my opening and I'm gonna pull this through. So the other reason why this method works best on knit fabrics and high stretch fabrics like this nylon lycra versus the hot dog method is because the hot dog method, because you are pulling and tugging the fabric through that tube, it causes these types of fabrics to warp and stretch and twist. Can you see that? It causes it to twist, and this twist it doesn't go away. When you put your elastic through, you're going to end up with a scrunchie that's pinched on one side. So when you do it this way, you have no warped stretching, no pinched sides of the scrunchie, and it comes out really nice every time, nice and fluffy. So I'm going to start this off. I'm going to keep this needle in this elastic. And I'm going to put this under, and I'm just going to put my machine needle down through both layers of the elastic. Okay, then I'm going to give it about a stitch, turning it by hand, being careful and mindful of this pin. Okay, now that I have that secure, I'm just going to go ahead and take that out and begin to zigzag stitch. Okay, so the machine's going to take this forward, so I'm going to reverse and go forward. And I'll even turn my elastic in the opposite direction, and I'm going to stitch it this way too. Give it a few stitches going in this direction. There we go. Good. So I've made a pretty good knot here that shouldn't come out. I can even put this back on the sewing machine and keep going over it a little bit, maybe to get this corner, but you get the idea. You just put it under there, zigzag it in a few directions, and secure it really good. Now, from here, you can either hand stitch this close, or you can put it under the sewing machine and you can top stitch. And that's it. So guys, that's it. That's how I make my scrunchies. If you found these two methods to be super easy, go ahead and let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you are here and you are not subscribed, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit the bell so you know when my next video comes out. Guys, I appreciate you. You are awesome. Thank you to all of my amazing subscribers. And guys, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.